Somewhere, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, beneath layers of coral and centuries of silence, a machine lay hidden. It had gears. It had precision. It could predict the heavens. And it was built more than 2,000 years ago. But that was only the beginning. Across ancient civilizations, there were machines so advanced, so powerful, they rewrote history and then disappeared. No manuals. No blueprints. No clear explanation. Were they destroyed? Forgotten? Or deliberately erased? Tonight, we uncover 6 ancient machines that changed history and then vanished. And by the end of this story, you may start to wonder, what else did we lose? One of these machines was so advanced, experts once refused to believe it was real. Somewhere, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, beneath layers of coral and centuries of silence, a machine lay hidden. It had gears. It had precision. It could predict the heavens. And it was built more than 2,000 years ago. But that was only the beginning. Across ancient civilizations, there were machines so advanced, so powerful, they rewrote history and then disappeared. No manuals. No blueprints. No clear explanation. Were they destroyed? Forgotten? Or deliberately erased? Tonight, we uncover 6 ancient machines that changed history and then vanished. And by the end of this story, you may start to wonder, what else did we lose? One of these machines was so advanced, experts once refused to believe it was real. This is a journey into the lost mechanics of the ancient world. Not myths, not legends, but real machines built by real engineers in civilizations we thought we understood. For generations, we imagined the ancient world as primitive, limited to stone tools and simple levers. But the deeper historians dig, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. Because scattered across ruins, shipwrecks, and forgotten texts, we keep finding something extraordinary. Complex mechanisms, precision engineering, knowledge that seems out of place. And the strangest part? In many cases, that knowledge didn't evolve. It vanished. Tonight, we explore 6 ancient machines that altered the course of history, devices that predicted eclipses, moved water across empires, terrified enemies in battle, and may have powered entire cities. Some were destroyed by war. Some were lost in catastrophe. And some may have been suppressed by time itself. Stay with me, because the first machine we're about to uncover was pulled from the sea in 1901, and what scientists saw inside it shattered everything they thought they knew about ancient technology. To understand how these machines could exist, we first have to let go of a myth. The myth that ancient civilizations were technologically simple. For centuries, historians painted a picture of steady progress, stone to bronze, bronze to iron, iron to steel. A clean, upward march of innovation. The modern world at the top, the ancient world at the bottom. But history is rarely that neat. Because when archaeologists began uncovering mechanical fragments buried in sand, sealed in tombs, or rusting beneath the sea, the timeline started to bend. Take ancient Greece. By the 3rd century BCE, the Hellenistic world was already a hub of experimentation. Alexandria, in Egypt, housed one of the greatest libraries ever assembled, a magnet for mathematicians, astronomers, and engineers. Figures like Archimedes, hero of Alexandria, and Ctesibius weren't just philosophers. They were builders. Archimedes designed war machines that could allegedly lift enemy ships out of the water. Hero described automated temples where doors opened by themselves using steam pressure. Ctesibius created complex water clocks powered by regulated air compression. This wasn't primitive tinkering. This was mechanical science. And it wasn't limited to Greece. In China during the Han Dynasty, engineers developed intricate astronomical instruments and mechanical clocks driven by water wheels. The south-pointing chariot, a vehicle said to maintain directional alignment through differential gearing, suggests a mechanical sophistication that wouldn't reappear in Europe for more than 1,000 years. Meanwhile, in ancient Rome, massive networks of aqueducts moved millions of gallons of water daily across vast distances, powered entirely by gravity gradients calculated with stunning precision. The ancient world was not technologically asleep. It was alive. So why does it feel like so much of that knowledge vanished? That question becomes even more unsettling when we examine how fragile ancient innovation truly was. Unlike modern societies, knowledge wasn't digitized, copied endlessly, or globally distributed. It was handwritten, stored in scrolls, guarded in single institutions. And when those institutions burned, knowledge burned with them. The Library of Alexandria, whether destroyed in a single catastrophe or multiple waves of decline, represents more than symbolic loss. Ancient sources like Plutarch and later historians describe vast collections of scientific and mechanical treatises housed within its walls. If engineering manuals were stored there, if mechanical blueprints existed, if generations of innovation were recorded, then their disappearance wasn't gradual. It was sudden. And then came war. Empires rose and fell with violence. When Rome collapsed in the 5th century CE, infrastructure decayed rapidly. Skilled artisans were scattered. Trade networks dissolved. Complex machinery, which required maintenance and precision craftsmanship, simply became unsustainable. In many cases, it wasn't that machines were destroyed intentionally. It was that no one remained who could build them. Imagine a world where only a handful of experts understand a critical system, and those experts disappear. The knowledge doesn't fade slowly. It stops. And that's exactly what appears to have happened multiple times in ancient history. We have fragments, descriptions in texts, pieces of corroded metal. But the continuity, the living tradition of engineering, breaks. And once it breaks, rediscovery can take centuries. That's why the discovery in 1901 was so shocking. When sponge divers off the coast of Antikythera hauled up a lump of encrusted bronze from a Roman shipwreck, no one suspected they were holding proof that ancient engineers had mastered precision gear systems centuries before medieval Europe. At first glance, it looked like debris. But inside were gears. Dozens of them. Interlocking. Calculated. Intentional. And when researchers finally understood what it did, it forced historians to confront a possibility they had long resisted. What if the ancient world was far more mechanically advanced than we ever imagined? And if that's true, how many other machines disappeared before we ever knew they existed? Because the first machine on our list didn't just measure time. It predicted the cosmos. In the spring of 1901, a group of sponge divers sailed into rough waters near a small Greek island called Antikythera. A storm had forced them off course. They weren't searching for history. They were searching for sponges. But when one diver descended nearly 150 feet into the cold Mediterranean, he didn't find coral beds. He found statues, bronze arms, marble faces, horses frozen in motion, an entire ancient shipwreck resting in silence. At first, Greek authorities believed it was just another Roman cargo vessel, likely transporting looted art from Greece to Rome sometime in the 1st century BC. But then, among the statues and amphorae, something strange emerged. A lump of bronze. Encrusted. Corroded. Unremarkable. It sat in storage at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for months. Until one day, it cracked open. Inside were teeth. Metal teeth. Gears. Not decorative gears. Not symbolic. But functional, interlocking mechanical components arranged with deliberate mathematical precision. And that's when the disbelief began. Because in 1901, historians were confident about one thing. Ancient Greeks did not build gear-driven machines of high complexity. Those belonged to medieval clockmakers, Renaissance engineers, post-Newtonian science. Yet here it was. A mechanical device dated to roughly 100 BC. Nearly 1,500 years before comparable European mechanisms. At first, scholars dismissed it. Some suggested it was a navigational instrument. Others proposed it was a simple astrolabe. But as imaging technology improved in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, especially X-ray tomography, the truth became unavoidable. The Antikythera Mechanism was an astronomical calculator. It tracked the movements of the sun and moon. It predicted eclipses using the Saros cycle. It modeled planetary motion. More than 30 precision bronze gears, cut by hand, and it wasn't a crude prototype. It was refined, which raises a chilling question. If this was a refined device, where were the earlier versions? Machines do not appear fully formed. They evolve, which means somewhere before the shipwreck, there were workshops, engineers, prototypes, iterations, but we have no surviving examples. None. It's as if an entire mechanical tradition flickered into existence and then vanished. And Antikythera may not have been unique. Ancient texts describe devices that sound almost impossible. Hero of Alexandria wrote about automatic theaters, miniature stages where figures moved by themselves, powered by concealed weights and pulleys. He described steam-powered devices, including the Eolipile, a rotating sphere propelled by jets of steam. It's often called the first steam engine, but it was never industrialized. Because the ancient world used steam as novelty, not labor. That decision, cultural, economic, perhaps even philosophical, shaped the future of technology. Rome relied on slave labor. Mechanical innovation wasn't driven by labor shortages. There was no urgent push to mechanize agriculture or industry. So even if the knowledge existed, the incentive did not. And then came the slow collapse. By the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the Roman Empire was under pressure, economic strain, political instability, invasions. Infrastructure maintenance declined. Skilled craftsmanship diminished. When centralized power weakens, complex systems fail first. Mechanical traditions require continuity, training, funding. Without those pillars, precision dies. And precision is fragile. Consider this. The Antikythera mechanism required gear ratios calculated to extraordinary accuracy. One incorrect tooth count, and the eclipse prediction fails. That level of engineering implies advanced mathematical knowledge. It implies metallurgy capable of fine casting and cutting. When Rome fell in 476 CE in the West, the institutional framework supporting such craftsmanship fractured. Libraries were lost. Trade routes disrupted. Workshops abandoned. Not overnight, but steadily. And somewhere along that slow unraveling, machines disappeared. The Antikythera mechanism remained hidden under the sea for nearly 2 millennia. But it may represent only the tip of something much larger. Because if one machine of that sophistication existed, what else was built? What else sank? Burned? Melted down for scrap? And here's the unsettling part. Some ancient writers hinted at technologies even more powerful than astronomical calculators. Weapons capable of setting fleets ablaze. Mirrors that harnessed sunlight as fire. Mechanical birds that flew. Doors that opened by themselves in temples, convincing worshippers the gods were present. Were these exaggerations? Or fragments of a mechanical world we barely glimpsed? Because the next machine on our list wasn't hidden underwater. It was described in vivid detail by Roman historians, and it may have changed the course of a war. In 214 BC, the Roman Republic was locked in a brutal struggle against Carthage. The Second Punic War had already shaken Rome to its core. Hannibal had marched elephants across the Alps. Roman legions had been crushed at Cannae. Fear spread through the Republic like wildfire. And then Rome turned its attention to Sicily, specifically to the wealthy Greek city of Syracuse. Syracuse was no ordinary city. It was the home of Archimedes, mathematician, inventor, engineer, a man so brilliant that even centuries later, his name would echo through textbooks. But in 214 BC, Archimedes was not just solving geometry problems. He was defending a city. When Roman general Marcus Claudius Marcellus launched a siege by land and sea, he expected a swift victory. Rome's military machine was relentless. Syracuse, though fortified, was isolated. But the Romans had underestimated one thing. They had underestimated Archimedes. Ancient historian Plutarch describes what happened next, and even he, writing generations later, struggled to convey it without awe. As Roman ships approached the harbor walls, something extraordinary occurred. From the ramparts, massive beams extended outward over the water. Hooks descended. chains tightened, and suddenly a Roman ship lifted. Not entirely, but enough to destabilize it. Enough to tip it sideways. Enough to send terrified sailors scrambling across a deck no longer horizontal. Then, with calculated precision, the machine released. The ship crashed back into the sea. Wood splintered, or snapped. Men fell overboard. Panic spread across the fleet. The Romans called it the Claw of Archimedes. Some accounts describe it as an iron grappling hook suspended from a pivoting crane-like arm. Others suggest a counterweight system that amplified leverage. Whatever its exact configuration, it was mechanical warfare. And it worked. Plutarch wrote that Roman soldiers became so terrified of the city walls that if they saw even a rope or wooden beam move above them, they would retreat, convinced another machine was about to strike. Think about that. An army that had defeated Carthaginian generals, shaken by machinery. But here's where it gets complicated. Modern historians debate whether the claw was exaggerated. Was it capable of fully lifting ships? Or merely rocking them violently? Physics suggests a full lift would require enormous force, but partial destabilization? That's entirely plausible. Which makes it even more interesting. Because whether mythologized or not, the Romans believed it was real. And belief on a battlefield can be more powerful than steel. Archimedes reportedly also constructed giant catapults calibrated for varying distances, precision artillery that could strike approaching forces long before they reached the walls. He may have designed adjustable torsion engines capable of launching projectiles with frightening accuracy. The siege dragged on for 2 years. 2 years. For a city that should have fallen quickly. Eventually, Rome breached Syracuse, not through mechanical superiority, but through strategy and betrayal during a festival night when vigilance weakened. And when Roman soldiers entered the city, Archimedes was killed. Legend says he was so absorbed in a mathematical diagram drawn in the sand that he ignored a soldier's command and was struck down. Marcellus reportedly ordered that Archimedes be spared. But war does not always obey orders. And with his death, something else may have died too. Because we have descriptions of his machines, but no surviving examples. No preserved claw. No mechanical blueprints. No verified fragments of his war devices. Were they dismantled? Melted down? Destroyed in the sack of the city? Or were they simply too specialized, too dependent on one brilliant mind, to survive without him? If Archimedes had lived longer, if his workshop had endured, could mechanical engineering have advanced centuries earlier? It's impossible to know. But this much is clear. In 214 BCE, Rome encountered machines that reshaped a battlefield. And once Syracuse fell, those machines vanished into history. Yet Archimedes' war engines were only one piece of a much larger mechanical puzzle. Because somewhere else in the ancient world, engineers weren't lifting ships. They were building something far more subtle. Something designed not to intimidate enemies, but to command the heavens. While Rome fought wars in the West, another kind of power was rising in the East. Not military power, mechanical power. During the Han Dynasty in China, roughly 200 BCE to 200 CE, imperial courts were obsessed with harmony between heaven and earth. Astronomy was not a hobby. It was governance. If an eclipse occurred unexpectedly, it was seen as a warning from the cosmos. A sign that the emperor had lost the mandate of heaven. So predicting celestial movement wasn't academic curiosity. It was political survival. And to do that, Chinese engineers began constructing astonishing machines. Among them was a device attributed to the polymath Zhang Heng in the 2nd century CE. At first glance, it appeared decorative, a large bronze urn adorned with dragons. But inside was something revolutionary. It was a seismoscope, the world's first known earthquake detector. The mechanism reportedly worked like this. When an earthquake struck, even hundreds of miles away, an internal pendulum system would shift, triggering one of 8 dragon heads positioned around the urn to release a bronze ball into the mouth of a waiting toad below. The direction of the dropped ball indicated the direction of the quake. And here's the astonishing part. According to the Ho Han Shu, the official history of the later Han Dynasty, Zhang Heng's device once dropped a ball indicating an earthquake in the west, even though no tremor was felt in the capital. Days later, a messenger arrived. An earthquake had indeed struck Western territories. Now pause for a moment. This was nearly 1,800 years before modern seismology. How did it work? Reconstructed models suggest a delicately balanced internal pendulum capable of responding to distant shockwaves. Some scholars debate whether the original accounts were embellished. Others argue that even a moderately sensitive inertial device would have been groundbreaking for its time. But here's the mystery. No original example survives. We have descriptions. We have reconstructions. We have debate. But the original machine is gone. And it wasn't alone. Chinese engineer Ma Jun in the 3rd century CE reportedly improved a device known as the south-pointing chariot, a mechanical vehicle designed so that a mounted figure would always point south, regardless of how the vehicle turned. Not by magnetism, but by differential gearing. Let that sink in. Differential gears, the same principle later used in modern automobiles, described nearly 1,700 years before they became standard in Europe. Joseph Needham, the British historian of science, argued that Chinese mechanical engineering may have reached levels of sophistication far ahead of its time. And yet, that knowledge did not create an industrial revolution. But some historians suggest bureaucratic conservatism limited mechanical application. Others argue that economic structures did not demand mechanization. Skilled human labor was abundant. So once again, we see a pattern. Advanced machinery, brilliant engineering, but limited continuity. By the late Han period, political instability, rebellion, and fragmentation weakened central authority. Workshops that required imperial funding lost support. Knowledge transmission fractured. Precision craftsmanship requires stability. Without it, innovation stalls. And when innovation stalls long enough, it disappears. The original seismoscope of Zhang Heng, if it functioned as described, could have transformed early disaster response across empires. Instead, it became a historical curiosity. A story preserved in text, but not in metal. Which brings us back to a haunting possibility. What if ancient machines were not rare anomalies, but survivors of much larger traditions that collapsed under political pressure? Because the next machine on our list didn't predict earthquakes. It harnessed water, the lifeblood of empires, on a scale so vast that even modern engineers still admire its elegance. And when it stopped working, entire cities felt it. Water. In the ancient world, water was power. Not metaphorically, literally. Cities did not rise where armies stood. They rose where water flowed. And no civilization understood this better than Rome. By the 1st century CE, the Roman Empire had constructed a hydraulic network so vast, so precise, that even modern engineers stand in awe of its efficiency. Aqueducts stretched for miles, sometimes more than 50 miles, maintaining a gradient of only a few feet per mile. Too steep, and the water would erode the channels. Too shallow, and it would stagnate. This was not guesswork. It was calculated engineering. But aqueducts were only the surface layer. Beneath the visible arches lay something even more impressive: automated water management systems. Roman engineers developed complex siphon systems using inverted pressure pipelines. They built settling tanks to filter debris. They constructed distribution towers, castellum divisorum, that allocated water to baths, fountains, and private homes with surprising precision. And then there were the mills. At Barbegal in southern Gaul, modern-day France, archaeologists uncovered what many now consider the world's first industrial-scale factory. 16 water wheels, arranged in 2 parallel rows, cascading down a hillside. Each wheel powered a millstone grinding grain into flour. Estimates suggest the complex could produce enough flour to feed thousands of people daily. This was not a rural mill. This was industrial production in the 2nd century CE. The system relied on carefully calibrated flow rates. Channels diverted water sequentially from one wheel to the next, maximizing energy extraction. The entire structure was a masterpiece of mechanical efficiency. But here's the unsettling part. By the late Roman period, Barbegal was abandoned. The wheels stopped turning. The channels clogged. The knowledge of how to construct and maintain such large-scale hydromechanical systems faded in Western Europe for centuries. Water mills did not disappear entirely. Smaller versions persisted, but nothing on the scale of Barbagal re-emerged until the medieval period. Political instability, economic contraction, reduced urban demand. When cities shrank, large centralized production lost purpose. And like so many ancient machines, the system decayed not because it failed, but because the world around it changed. But water-powered innovation didn't stop there. In the Roman East, particularly in regions like Asia Minor, engineers built automated devices powered by water pressure and air displacement. Hero of Alexandria described temple mechanisms where water flowing into concealed chambers displaced air, triggering pulleys that opened massive doors. To worshippers, it appeared divine. To engineers, it was physics. Imagine standing in a marble temple. Priests perform a ritual. A fire is lit on the altar. Moments later, without human touch, the doors slowly swing open. The gods, it seemed, had responded. But behind the spectacle was a mechanical secret. And secrets are fragile. Because when temples were destroyed, repurposed, or abandoned during later religious transformations, the machinery inside them was rarely preserved. Metal was valuable. Bronze was melted down. Wood rotted. And with each collapse, mechanical memory thinned. What makes Barbagal and similar hydraulic systems so compelling is this. They prove that ancient societies were capable of scaling mechanical power. They understood renewable energy. They applied it industrially, but they did not transition into sustained mechanized economies. The chain broke, and when the chain breaks, rediscovery can take centuries, which forces us to confront a difficult possibility. Technological progress is not inevitable. It is conditional, dependent on stability, on institutions, on culture. Remove those pillars, and even the most brilliant machines can vanish into silence. And silence is exactly what followed. Because the next machine on our list wasn't about water. It wasn't about war. It was about fire. A weapon so terrifying that entire fleets feared it. And its formula was lost to history. In the 7th century CE, the Mediterranean was no longer Rome's lake. A new power had risen. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, stood under siege. Arab fleets pressed against its coasts. Constantinople itself, the greatest fortified city in the world, faced annihilation. And then, fire fell on the sea. Not ordinary fire. This fire clung to ships. It floated on water. It burned even when waves crashed over it. Sailors screamed as flames crawled across the surface of the ocean. Wood ignited instantly. Sails erupted. Panic spread faster than the blaze itself. The Byzantines called it liquid fire. History calls it Greek fire. According to chroniclers like Theophanes the Confessor, the weapon was first deployed during the Arab siege of Constantinople in 674 to 678 CE. Byzantine ships equipped with siphon-like tubes projected flaming streams toward enemy vessels. Imagine it. A bronze nozzle mounted at the prow. A pressurized chamber below deck. A pump system operated by trained crews. Then ignition. A roaring jet of flame across open water. This was not myth. Multiple independent sources describe its use over centuries. Theophanes. Anna Komnene in the Alexiad. Arab historians who encountered it firsthand. And it worked. Greek fire played a decisive role in saving Constantinople more than once. It preserved the Byzantine state at critical moments when collapse seemed inevitable. But here's where the story turns. We do not know exactly how it was made. Most scholars believe it was a petroleum-based mixture, possibly including naphtha, quicklime, sulfur, or resin. The Byzantine Empire had access to natural petroleum deposits near the Black Sea. Yet the precise formula remains debated. And more importantly, the delivery system was mechanical. It required pressurization. It required storage vessels capable of withstanding volatile compounds. It required trained operators. This was not a simple Molotov cocktail. It was integrated chemical engineering, and the Byzantines guarded it fiercely. knowledge of the formula was reportedly restricted to a small circle of specialists, perhaps even within a single family. It was treated as a state secret, which ensured short-term dominance, but created long-term fragility. Because when the Byzantine Empire gradually declined, especially after the Fourth Crusade in 1204 and later Ottoman expansion, the institutional framework protecting that secret weakened. By the time Constantinople fell in 1453, Greek fire was gone. Not evolved. Not replicated elsewhere in identical form. Gone. Historians still debate whether later incendiary weapons were true descendants or merely inspired imitations. The original formula, the one that terrified fleets, vanished with the empire that wielded it. And here's the twist. Greek fire was not a lost accident like a sunken shipwreck. It was deliberately concealed, intentionally restricted, which means its disappearance was not purely the result of chaos. It was the result of control. And that raises an unsettling pattern we've now seen multiple times. Archimedes' war machines tied to a single genius. Zhang Heng's seismoscope tied to imperial patronage. Barbigil's mills tied to urban demand. Greek fire tied to state secrecy. When knowledge becomes centralized, its survival depends on the survival of power. And when power falls, so does the machine. Greek fire preserved an empire for centuries. But its secrecy ensured that once that empire weakened, the knowledge would not spread. It would extinguish, which forces us to confront something uncomfortable. How many ancient technologies vanished not because humanity couldn't preserve them, but because institutions chose not to share them? Because the final two machines on our list weren't weapons. They weren't industrial mills. They were something even more profound. They were attempts to harness the fundamental forces of nature. And if even part of what ancient texts suggest is true, then the disappearance of those machines may represent one of the greatest intellectual losses in human history. In 1853, workers clearing a burial mound near Baghdad uncovered something strange. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A small clay jar, about 5 inches tall. Inside it, a copper cylinder. And within that cylinder, an iron rod. It didn't look like a weapon. It didn't look like a clock. It looked almost mundane. But decades later, when German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig examined similar artifacts housed in the Iraq Museum, he noticed something unusual. The configuration resembled a galvanic cell. A primitive battery. Now imagine that. A device potentially capable of generating electricity, dating to the Parthian or early Sasanian period, roughly 250 BCE to 250 CE. When modern researchers replicated the structure using vinegar or grape juice as an electrolyte, the jar produced a small electrical charge. Not powerful, but measurable. Enough to plate a thin layer of metal onto another surface. Which led to a bold hypothesis. What if the so-called Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating? What if ancient craftsmen understood, at least empirically, how to generate electrical current? The idea electrified the public imagination, but historians remain divided. Some argue the jars were simple storage vessels for scrolls or sacred texts. Others point out the lack of clear wiring or accompanying apparatus in archaeological context. There's no definitive proof the jars were batteries. And yet, the design is undeniably suggestive. If they were batteries, even on a small scale, they represent experimentation with electrochemical principles nearly 1,800 years before Alessandro Volta. But here's the crucial point. We do not have a complete system. No confirmed workshop. No clear manuals. No widespread network of electrical devices. Only fragments. And fragments can mislead. Which brings us to the final machine, perhaps the most intellectually devastating of all. In 1st century Alexandria, Hero described a device that many historians still struggle to categorize. The Yalapile. Picture a hollow metal sphere mounted between two pivot points. Water inside the sphere is heated. Steam escapes through two bent tubes extending from its equator. As steam jets out, the sphere spins. It is, in principle, a steam turbine. 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution. Now pause. Steam power is what drove the modern world. It powered locomotives, factories, global empires. Yet here it was, demonstrated in antiquity. So why didn't it transform history? The answer may be painfully simple. Context. Hero described the Yalapile as a curiosity, a temple device, a demonstration of pneumatic principles, not an engine of industry. The ancient economy relied heavily on slave labor and animal power. There was no economic pressure to replace manual work with machinery. Innovation without incentive often remains novelty, and novelty fades. But consider the implication. The principles underlying steam turbines existed. The mechanical curiosity was there. If even one civilization had combined sustained experimentation, economic motivation, and institutional continuity, history could have accelerated by centuries. Instead, the Yalapile remained a footnote. No large-scale steam engines emerged in antiquity. No industrial transformation. The knowledge lingered, then dissolved. So now we stand at the climax of this story. 6 machines. The Antikythera Mechanism, predicting eclipses. Archimedes' claw, defending cities. Zhang Heng's seismoscope, sensing earthquakes. Barbigil's mills, industrial water power. Greek fire, weaponized chemistry. And the Baghdad Battery or Yalapile, flirting with electricity and steam. Different cultures, different centuries. Same pattern. Innovation appears. It flourishes briefly. Then something breaks. Collapse. Secrecy. Economic stagnation. Cultural inertia. And the machine vanishes. Not because humanity lacked intelligence, but because intelligence alone is not enough. Progress requires preservation, and preservation is fragile. Which leads to one final question. If so many ancient machines disappeared, what might be waiting still, buried beneath sand, sealed in shipwrecks, or dismissed as debris in museum storage? Because history has already surprised us once, and it may do so again. So what did these vanished machines actually change? At first glance, it's tempting to treat them as curiosities. Fascinating relics. Ancient brilliance flickering briefly in the dark. But look closer, and their impact becomes undeniable. The Antikythera Mechanism proved that mathematical astronomy in the Hellenistic world was not abstract philosophy, it was mechanized. It demonstrated that gear ratios could embody cosmic cycles. That knowledge influenced Islamic scholars centuries later, who preserved and expanded Greek astronomical traditions. Without that intellectual bridge, the European Renaissance might have looked very different. Archimedes' war machines did more than defend Syracuse. They reshaped Roman military engineering. Rome became obsessed with siegecraft. Over time, mechanical artillery became standardized in Roman campaigns. Innovation spreads fastest when fear forces adaptation. Zhang Heng's seismoscope signaled something equally profound. The belief that natural disasters were measurable, not mystical. Even if the original device vanished, the mindset endured. Chinese scientific tradition continued refining astronomical and mechanical knowledge through later dynasties. Barbigil's mills proved that industrial-scale production was possible long before the Middle Ages. When medieval Europe eventually embraced water-powered industry, it wasn't inventing from nothing. It was rediscovering dormant principles. Greek fire altered geopolitics. Without it, Constantinople may have fallen centuries earlier. And if Constantinople had fallen in the 7th century, Europe's political and religious map could have shifted dramatically. A single technological edge can redirect history's flow. Even the Baghdad Battery and the Yalapile, controversial or limited as they may be, remind us that experimentation with electricity and steam was not born in the 18th century. It was rediscovered. And that word, rediscovered, may be the most important in this entire story. Because technological history is not a straight line. It is cyclical. Knowledge rises. It consolidates. It fractures. It sleeps. Then someone, somewhere, finds a fragment and begins again. The Renaissance wasn't merely innovation. It was recovery. Islamic scholars preserved Greek mechanical texts during Europe's early medieval fragmentation. When those texts returned westward through Spain and Italy, they ignited new waves of engineering thought. But imagine how much more might have survived if the original workshops had endured. Imagine if Archimedes' designs had been institutionalized into engineering academies. Imagine if the Library of Alexandria had not burned, whether gradually or catastrophically. Imagine if Greek fire's chemical engineering had spread openly instead of being locked within imperial secrecy. Progress is not inevitable. It is vulnerable. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson these vanished machines offer. Human intelligence has always been extraordinary, but intelligence requires infrastructure. It requires transmission. It requires stability. Without those, even the most brilliant invention can vanish into myth. Today, we live in a world where knowledge is duplicated instantly across continents. Digital archives store more information than entire ancient libraries could ever contain. And yet, we are not immune to collapse. Cyber vulnerabilities, political instability, environmental crisis. The fragility that ended ancient mechanical traditions still exists, only in different forms. History does not guarantee preservation. It warns us about its absence. The 6 machines we explored tonight are not just stories of lost technology. They are reminders. Reminders that progress is not permanent, that innovation is not self-sustaining, that civilizations can reach extraordinary heights and still forget how they got there. And somewhere beneath sand, stone, or sea, there may be more waiting. Today, when historians look back at these machines, the conversation is no longer just about wonder. It's about systems. Modern scholars increasingly agree that ancient engineers were not isolated geniuses working in cultural darkness. They were part of structured intellectual ecosystems, libraries, courts, workshops, trade networks. The Antikythera Mechanism wasn't magic. It was the product of accumulated Babylonian astronomy, Greek mathematics, and metallurgical skill. Greek fire wasn't sorcery. It was chemical engineering supported by imperial secrecy and naval doctrine. Zhang Heng's seismoscope wasn't superstition. It was observational science embedded within bureaucratic governance. And Barbagal wasn't a fluke. It was infrastructure built for a dense urban economy. What we are really examining is not why ancient people were brilliant. That much is clear. We are examining why brilliance sometimes fails to scale. Economic historians like Peter Temin argue that the Roman world had markets sophisticated enough to support technological growth, but lacked sustained incentives to mechanize labor. Slave economies reduced pressure to automate. Joseph Needham posed a similar question about China. Why did advanced mechanical and scientific knowledge not trigger an early industrial revolution? His answer wasn't about intelligence, it was about social structure, bureaucracy, and economic priorities. Technology doesn't exist in isolation. It thrives when culture demands it. And perhaps that is the modern twist, because we often imagine ourselves at the peak of irreversible progress. But history suggests something more sobering. Technological advancement depends on political stability, economic incentive, knowledge transmission, cultural openness. Remove even one pillar, and continuity weakens. Ancient machines vanished not because humans regressed intellectually, but because the frameworks supporting them fractured. And here's where the story becomes deeply relevant. In 1901, sponge divers stumbled upon the Antikythera mechanism by accident. In 1938, museum curators re-examined jars that had sat quietly in storage. In the 20th century, archaeologists rediscovered Barbagal's scale through careful excavation. Each rediscovery reshaped our understanding of the ancient world, which means our current view of history is incomplete. We do not possess the full archive of humanity's past ingenuity. We possess what survived, and survival is selective. So when we look at these 6 vanished machines, we are not just studying technology. We are studying fragility. Because the most dangerous myth about history is that progress only moves forward. In reality, it moves in waves. And the question that lingers, quietly, persistently, is this. If future civilizations excavate our ruins thousands of years from now, what fragments of our technology will they find? And what will they assume we lost? If this story changed the way you see the ancient world, then history has already done its job. Because the past is not primitive. It is layered, complex, and sometimes shockingly advanced. If you enjoyed uncovering these 6 ancient machines that changed history and then vanished, make sure you subscribe and join us on this journey. Every week, we dive into the hidden chapters of human civilization, the forgotten breakthroughs, the buried conspiracies, the turning points that almost rewrote everything. And next time, we're traveling even deeper into mystery, because there are ancient maps that depict coastlines before they were officially discovered. There are texts that describe lands no one should have known existed. Were they mistakes? Coincidences? Or evidence of lost exploration? The story of forgotten machines may only be the beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next.